maybe I'd have to, you know, write newspaper articles or do something else, but I just didn't want to actually kill someone. I didn't think I wanted that on my conscience.
Between 1966 and 68, I did basic infantry training at Fort Lewis, Washington, advanced infantry training at Fort Lewis, Washington. I was then selected, which I don't know of how many Canadians or others who are not Americans there are, but I was selected for Officer Candidate School, and I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which was the Artillery Officer Candidate School, and then was reassigned in '68 to Vietnam. I saw a lot while I was in there that year, in Vietnam that year, a lot.
Like what?
Well, I had the unfortunate, there was only one National Guard unit, unlike today, that was in Vietnam at that time, and that was a 155 millimeter self-propelled artillery unit, and they were our sister battalion, and we were on adjoining hills about a half a mile apart, and I watched them get overrun. National Guard, they weren't properly, to my mind, and there's nothing against the National Guard in general, but at that time, to my mind, they were ill-trained and unprepared for what they were getting themselves into. And they were Kentucky National Guard, and there was a lot of people that went home in body bags from that National Guard unit. And you know, I could not, or was not allowed to do anything to try and stop that situation or go to their relief until the following day. I also got we were also mortared and rocketed on innumerable occasions, and while flying as an air observer, I was very close to getting shot out of the sky when both sides of a valley opened up at our small aircraft, which were like Cessnas with 2 6-foot guys in them, flying at a maximum speed of about 90 miles an hour, running ammunition supply convoys into the A Shaw Valley, running roads that you didn't know whether they were mined or not, all sorts of fun stuff like that.
Did you kill anybody?
We won't go into that.
Okay.
My father was who had fought in a jungle war, was the only one who really gave me any support at all, and he basically said it was up to me. And by then, that was '68, and by then we'd seen a lot of the fighting on TV, and everybody knew what a horrible situation it was. And so what happened to me was that I found out that the Army would allow me to go to graduate school. If I could get in graduate school, they would let me stay out for another 2 years to go to grad school. So I tried that. The only thing I could do was creative writing. I'd been writing. I'd come to all this stuff about war, so I'd been doing a lot of writing and reading. I was the editor of the yearbook, and I was, of the literary magazine, and I was the layout editor of the yearbook. I was really into publication. So I got accepted to UBC, which was amazing in creative writing. There were only 9 students at the time. And I had been recommended by the Colonel Taylor, who was the head of the English department at VMI. And I think they took me at UBC because I was so completely weird. I was this weirdo from military college. And I started doing theater. There wasn't anything else I could do. And I did theater. And then in 1975, I got this letter saying, did I want to retire? And I said yes. And then a month later, I got promoted to first lieutenant. And then a month after that, I was retired. So it all worked out very well for me. I didn't have to kill anybody. I never actually had to go to jail. I never had to commit any crimes. I had to do a lot of red tape and a lot of paperwork, but most of that went nowhere. And it kept me here, and it kept me in theater for a good long time, to where that bug bit firmly. And, you know, I'm still here. I had no intention of staying here for 38 years, I tell you. You know, I mean, I was going to just come up here, do this, you know, and then go back home and build dump trucks for my family. But it changed my life, that period of time.
How did you feel about being discharged after your...
Being discharged, well, it's what, you know, I was finished with my tour of duty, and that was fine. I wanted, you know, I didn't well, I had no intention of making it a career. So my time was up, and I wasn't, there's no reason to stay, so I came home. Came through Seattle and was met at the Seattle airport by people who labeled me as a drug-crazed psychopathic baby killer. Those are some of the terms that were used. So,
what did you do when you get back?
I went back to school, got married and went back to school. Went back to UBC. And then after a year of school, I joined the Vancouver Police Department and did 8.5 years as a police officer.
You know, one thing that I think is a blemish from Vietnam is and you hear this a lot of times from people who were on the side of fighting the war in Vietnam. You hear this like, our soldiers were spat upon. You know, our soldiers were, got the short end of the stick when they came home. Their heroism wasn't recognized. Well, that wasn't, if you go back and look too, that wasn't true for the bulk of the Vietnam War. That was only true for the last years, because by the time by 1970, 71, right in there, by then all the information about the war had come out in the public consciousness. Everybody knew. If you were a student or could read or watch TV, by then you knew what the truth was in Vietnam. If you didn't know, you were just being willfully ignorant.
Okay, we talked about how Canadian government was not involved in Vietnam War, and so
yes, they were.
Well,
like most governments, they don't tell you the whole truth. They were wholeheartedly in favor of and in support of Canadian firms that were supplying military goods to the United States. That included such things as ammunition, small arms ammunition, and right down to the Green Berets that the Special Forces wore. They were Canadian made. So the government was doing the wink, wink, nudge, nudge trip at that time. And they were well aware of the practice of Canadian citizens going south. And made...
What was their take on that?
They just ignored it. They just didn't care one way or another. And it was not until, I believe it was the late 70s, that there was finally a situation where there was supposedly an agreement that the United States would not accept any more Canadian coming south to enlist in the U.S. military.
Okay.
Which, that one has gone by the board again, too.
I mean, Canadians can go and join the United States.
They have, and they still do. I know of Canadian citizens serving in Iraq right now. And just for your information, the Deputy Commanding General of 3 Corps, which is the corps commanding the largest number of U.S. troops in Iraq, is a Canadian general officer. And the government is certainly not about to tell you that. So the government has a tendency to either ignore what they don't want people to hear, or to just not tell you, or basically cover stuff up.
It's a part of the thing that is so unsettling about Iraq and American presence in the Mideast now is that it has so many echoes and tendrils that for those who are around, you just keep seeing Vietnam all over again. And you think, oh my God, this is turning into the same kind of mess. We're creating a, democratic government. I remember when they had elections in Vietnam, they would have these elections, and they put in, some pretty horrendous people, as long as they would do the bidding of the U.S. Now, I'm not saying